morning.
Oh, shitty ass.
Hope everybody had a nice weekend. I'm gonna wait a couple minutes before we get started because we're still missing like pretty much half of everyone. Don't mess with it. I cannot. Excuse me, I have to go fix something that a coworker of mine just messed up. Seriously. All right, who have we got? We've got Corey, we've got no Christian yet. It's in kind of a lot right now. Here comes Ian. Don't have Christian yet, we do have Brendan. We have got, we don't have Hayward. No Troy. Eli, Nate, Chip, Sterling, and Ondarius. Okay, so we're missing 3, and here comes Troy. Good. Here comes Hayward. Wonderful. So we're only missing Christian. All right, I'll mark him absent. If he shows up, I'll change it. All right, hope everybody had a nice weekend. You know, as of right now, you guys are going to be coming back next week, so things might feel a little bit more normal. Which I know that some of you you prefer being here, but I gotta say it's kind of nice having you all in one place. I wish that place was in the classroom. I wish we were back to normal, but not yet. Okay, so today we are gonna, actually this week is kind of gonna be poetry week. We're gonna look at some of the most famous romantic poets, which there's a handful. There's actually a lot of romantic poets, but there are several that kind of stick out as being like the top romantic poets. And the one that we're going to look at today, his name is William Blake. And he was a writer as well as an artist. In fact, did any of you guys ever see that movie Red Dragon, the Hannibal movie, or watch the show Hannibal? When they're dealing, if you have, when they're dealing with the guy who is first known as the Tooth Fairy and then becomes known as the Red Dragon, he's like a total crazy person, and he has this big like dragon tattoo on the back, and he thinks he's like transforming into a red dragon. But he is like basing his personality on this William Blake painting, which is interesting. And then I think in the end he eats the painting because he's like trying to make it a part of himself or something. He's a real lunatic. But Hannibal's a good show, first of all, and Red Dragon is also a good movie. I love all the Hannibal stuff. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen with you guys. And before we actually look at his poems, we're going to look at just this little bit on Wikipedia about him. His most famous collection of books was originally 2 separate ones, Songs of Innocence and Songs of Experience, but now it's usually just published as Songs of Innocence and Experience. And he, like, they were illustrated. He did the illustrations himself. It's this kind of thing. But it's the point of having them together is to kind of show, as it says here, the 2 contrary states of the human soul. So I'm just going to read this bit. I might skip over a little bit of it, but innocence and experience are definitions of consciousness that rethink Milton's existential mythic states of paradise and fall. And just to kind of catch you up on that, and Milton will show up later in something that we're going to read. John Milton was a writer, primarily a poet, who wrote this thing called Paradise Lost, which is an epic poem. We know what an epic poem is, that told the story of the creation and Satan's fall. So like the antagonism between God and Satan. And a lot of it is like from the point of view of Satan, which is interesting, or at least maybe not from the point of view, but it like shows his perspective. So a lot of people think that this collection, Innocence and Experience, kind of revolves around this duality where innocence represents the unfallen world and experience represents the fallen world. So like after man committed the first sin, there's like innocence would be before that when everything was innocent. And then after Adam and Eve sinned in the Garden of Eden, that was the fall of man. And so the experience part kind of circles around that. So the way that he kind of makes that connection through his poems is basically through like childhood versus adulthood and understanding. Childhood is a state of protected innocence rather than original sin, but it's not immune to the fallen world and its institutions. So even in the innocence poems, they'll be, you know, you might be dealing with some like darker subject matter or like big questions. This world sometimes impinges on childhood itself and in any event becomes known through experience, a state of being marked by the loss of childhood vitality, by fear and inhibition, by social and political corruption, and by the manifold oppression of church, state, and the ruling classes. And because of this, because there's like this duality, and he wrote the innocence ones first, and then he wrote the experience ones, there's some sort of like pairs of poems, and we're going to look at 2 pairs of poems today. One being in the innocence part and one being in the experience part. I'm just going to click on this real quick, musical settings, because I'm curious. That's a lot to read, and we're not going to look at it right now. When I was in 6th grade, I think, I was in this like elementary honors chorus, like a statewide thing, and I don't remember where it was, but I like got to go to this hotel and do like a class for several days and sing these songs. But there were like 2 songs that we sang in this children's chorus that were 2 of the William Blake poems that we're going to read, and I still remember them really well, which is interesting. So if you go to Canvas, I've already published these. You should just have access to this doc. I feel like whatever email okay, whatever, that's fine. I'll look at that later. It's about your senior photos. Okay. Now, I thought I changed this, but I apparently didn't. So I want to read them a little bit out of order because I meant to change this and I just forgot. I want to do innocence and then experience, and then innocence and then experience. So the Tiger and the Lamb are the 2 poems that are kind of like sister poems. And the Lamb was the one from innocence and the tiger with a Y. You actually really need to already have your photos taken. It's really important to do it literally as quickly as possible because our deadline for yearbook is in like maybe a week and a half. So that's a thing. Sorry, someone just asked me that in the chat. Okay, so we're going to read the Lamb first, and keep in mind, this is going to be like, this is from the innocence part, so it's obviously like a little bit more childlike than some things that we're going to see. And then also keep in mind all the things that we know about romanticism, imagination, arts, emotion, all of these things that we learned about. Okay, anybody want to read the Lamb? Nobody wants to read the Lamb. Okay, I'll read the Lamb. Little lamb, who made thee? Dost thou know who made thee? Gave thee life and bid thee feed by the streams and o'er the mead? Gave thee clothing of delight, softest clothing, woolly bright, gave thee such a tender voice, making all the vales rejoice? Little lamb, who made thee? Dost thou know who made thee? Little lamb, I'll tell thee, little lamb, I'll tell thee. He is called by thy name, for he calls himself a lamb. He is meek and he is mild, he became a little child. I a child and now a lamb, we are called by his name. Little lamb, God bless thee, little lamb, God bless thee. Okay, pretty simple. I think probably the most interesting part is here at the end, he's called by thy name, for he calls himself a lamb. Who are they talking about here? Lamb with a capital L. Any ideas?
Jesus?
Jesus. Yes, exactly. The whole thing basically is asking, like, is addressing a lamb, which is sort of like a childlike thing to do. I mean, I myself, if I go on a walk and see animals, I say hi to them every time. That's true. I'll be like, hey, squirrel, hey, bird. But generally, that is a childlike thing to do. And so, like, addressing this poem to a lamb, which is like such a sweet, cute, innocent animal, that definitely sounds like it's maybe from the perspective of a child, except for the fact that they use all these words that children probably wouldn't use. But the big question here is, who made you, little lamb? And then in the end, they kind of answer that by saying that the Lamb of God made him, and kind of makes this comparison to himself. But saying that Jesus is, like, he calls himself a lamb, and lambs are called after him, and people are made in his image, I guess. But it's interesting that, like, since this whole thing is kind of focused on children, or like a child's point of view, saying that he became a little child, which kind of just further serves that sort of parallel between Jesus and a lamb. And so the whole thing is kind of just like, number one, asking some like important questions, but in a childlike way. And then drawing attention to the religious aspect of it. So it'll be interesting to see how the one that is from the Songs of Experience is sort of different, because I'll go ahead and tell you, the same question is asked, basically, like, who made you? but with really different, like there's a really different feel to it. So this one is called The Tiger with a Y. I don't know why it's with a Y, but it is. Anybody want to read this one? Okay. I remember the song to this one really well, though. Actually, it like gets in my head sometimes. Tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forests of the night, what immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? In what distant deeps or skies burnt the fire of thine eyes? On what wings dare he aspire? What the hand dare seize the fire? And what shoulder and what art could twist the sinews of thy heart? And when thy heart began to beat, what dread hand and what dread feet? What the hammer, what the chain, in what furnace was thy brain? What the anvil, what dread grasp dare its deadly terrors clasp? When the stars threw down their spears and watered heaven with their tears, did he smile his work to see? Did he who made the lamb make thee? Tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forests of the night, what immortal hand or eye dare frame thy fearful symmetry? Okay, so we've got two poems that are both about animals, both asking the question, who made you? But very different in the way they approach it. Even if you just look at the words that they actually use, when they talk about the lamb, softest clothing, woolly bright, gave thee such a tender voice. Like that's kind of cute, pleasant imagery. With the tiger, it's a lot more fearsome. Like first of all, he's burning bright, fearful symmetry, the sinews of thy heart. That's like, it's much more like visceral imagery. They're asking a lot of questions. They're asking the same main question, who made you? But there's such a different approach to the way they're asking it. Obviously with the lamb, they're asking like, who made you, and are you like your maker in any way? Like, who gave you life and who let you do all these cute things that you do? And with the tiger, it's almost like, who would dare make such a fearful creature? I think they say the word dare somewhere. On what wings dare he aspire? Like, who could ever grasp having as much power as it takes to make a creature as fearsome as a tiger? And that's kind of the whole thing. It's got a much darker tone. It's got a much more urgent feel of asking the questions, especially like right here. This part always actually makes me think of my British literature class in college, which was my my favorite professor ever. I remember him reading this, and this is much more common to hear this kind of thing in college than in high school, but he was like, what about all these questions? What dread hand? What dread feet? What the hammer? What the chain? What the hell? And I think about that every time I read this. Even the imagery about the tiger is kind of darker. Like, in what furnace was thy brain? Just to think about like creating a creature's brain in a fire and like hammering it out. It's almost like blacksmithing or goldsmithing or welding or something. Whereas with the lamb, it doesn't really go into that. It doesn't really go into like how the lamb is made out of clouds and cotton candy or something. But with a tiger, you like meld a tiger. And also with the lamb, it's kind of assumed that this is just a good thing. And here at the end of the tiger, it's like, did he smile his work to see? Was he proud of what he made? Was he happy with it? Or like, would you, maybe if you created something as terrifying as that, would you be happy with that? So you can definitely see that the songs of experience are going to be a little bit different and a little bit darker, and a little bit more like ambiguous, I guess. the lamb is very childlike, and it has religion in there, talking about how Jesus is the lamb and everything. And so does the tiger, but it's asking some bigger questions. And that's kind of a theme that you see throughout these books. The Songs of Innocence do tend to incorporate religion and God and spirituality, but all in kind of a positive way, or at least for the most part in a positive way. But like the Wikipedia thing said, it sometimes involves the world like impinging on childhood and kind of affecting it and making children lose their innocence. And in the experience part, you see that through religion a lot. Like how people question their spiritual beliefs, and sometimes are kind of, I don't know if oppressed is the right word, but people feel like they have to follow the rules of the church. And especially back then, like you did not have as many like different types of religion, types of belief systems as we see in the world now. It was basically like either you were a Christian or you weren't. And if you weren't, then that wasn't okay. So we definitely see that. So let's move on to the next two poems, both of which are called The Chimney Sweeper. This first one that we're going to look at is from Innocence, and then the second one is from Experience. Now, this one from Innocence is not totally like happy and lovely like the lamb pretty much was, but just think about like how it is more like how it might be sort of childlike, how it might represent innocence. When my mother died, I was very young, and my father sold me, while yet my tongue could scarcely cry, weep, 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 weep. So your chimneys I sweep, and in soot I sleep. There's little Tom Dacre who cried when his head that curled like a lamb's back was shaved. So I said, hush, Tom, never mind it, for when your head's bare, you know that soot cannot spoil your white hair. And so he was quiet, and that very night, as Tom was asleeping, he had such a sight that thousands of sweepers, Dick, Joe, Ned, and Jack, were all of them locked up in coffins of black. And by came an angel who had a bright key, and he opened the coffins and set them all free. Then down a green plain, leaping, laughing, they run, and wash in a river, and shine in the sun. Then naked and white, all their bags left behind, they rise upon clouds and sport in the wind. And the angel told Tom if he'd be a good boy, he'd have God for his father and never want joy. So Tom awoke, and we rose in the dark and got with our bags and our brushes to work. Though the morning was cold, Tom was happy and warm. So if all do their duty, they need not fear harm. I'm going to get up just because I'm tired of sitting. I got this new standing desk. I'm very excited about it. I can just like roll up to you guys whenever you're actually here. So this is kind of a dark poem, to be fair. Starts out in the worst place you can be, really. My mother died and my father sold me. One of the things that we know about Romanticism is that, oh my God, I keep saying Romanticism. No, it is Romanticism. Okay. Sometimes I get confused because I do this and American Lit, and some of the eras are called similar things, but I, especially the R's, I just like will say the wrong ones sometimes. But no, we're in Romanticism. But one thing is that there's some like nitty gritty reality going on here, and in this time period, and this is definitely an example of that for sure. It is still childlike in a way because it's obviously like being told from the perspective of this kid whose mom was died, and he was sold like probably to a workhouse, like a very Oliver Twist type of deal. And he is a chimney sweep, hence the title, The Chimney Sweeper. He sleeps in soot. He's just all like dirty and working hard, and that's kind of his life. He talks about he's still sort of this speaker is still sort of trying to look on the positive side, even though he does not have a good life. And I think that is very childlike. children, much more so than adults, tend to like not really grasp the horror of certain circumstances. So even when his little friend, who is also a chimney sweep, had his head shaved, he was like, doesn't matter, like it's okay, because if you don't have hair then you can't get soot all in it, and that's nice. um, and so he has this dream. um, the other character, Tom, has a dream that basically like everyone is dead. Everyone that he knows is dead. But instead of that being like a nightmare, he thinks of it as like a good thing, because this angel comes and sets them free from their coffins, and they're basically just like in heaven and everything's wonderful. They don't have to sweep any chimneys. They're clean. Which, like, if you're a chimney sweep, if you've seen Mary Poppins, you'll know they're like constantly covered in soot, and it makes them dirty and dark and gross. Um, and then in the end, even though this is kind of a horrible poem, it ends on a happy note, because Tom wakes up from his dream and they all go to work, and he's like, oh well, it's okay, because if we keep doing this, and if we just like do our job, then we'll die and we'll go to heaven, and life will be grand, or death will be grand. um, it's a really interesting perspective. And obviously, even though this is from a child's perspective, I feel like a child could never have written this, because children just don't really like think that way. This is definitely like an adult writing this from a child's perspective. But again, you can kind of see that there's this childlike innocence, especially like in regards to religion or spirituality, because they're like, oh, even if we die, angels will come and get us and we'll be okay. And that's definitely, maybe more of a childlike perspective. Not saying that people don't believe that as an adult, but they, would kind of think about it a little bit more critically, probably. Okay, this is our last one, and then we're gonna be done for the day. Again, this one's called The Chimney Sweeper. This one is from Songs of Experience, so gonna be a little bit probably, I don't know that I would say darker, because that other one was pretty dark, but pretty, maybe a little bit more cynical. Um, but it's got some real similarities with the last one for sure. Okay, anybody want to read it? Okay. A little black thing among the snow, crying weep, weep in notes of woe. Where are thy father and mother? Say, they are both gone up to the church to pray. Because I was happy upon the heath and smiled among the winter snow, they clothed me in the clothes of death and taught me to sing the notes of woe. And because I am happy and dance and sing, they think they have done me no injury, and are gone to praise God and his priest and king, who make up a heaven of our misery. That last line is really kind of like what hits home, which let's just talk about kind of what's going on in this. The speaker, comes across this chimney sweeper boy in the snow, a little black thing among the snow. He's going to be like covered in soot. So he's just going to kind of stand out as like this spot of darkness in the snow. Very upset. And when the speaker asks him where his mother and father are, he's like, they're at church. They just kind of left me because I was so happy at home, like in my horrible life, that they were like, no, you need to learn better. So they clothed him in the clothes of death. So probably he's already dark and soot covered. And then they put him in like black clothes and taught him to sing the notes of woe. They think that he needs to be more realistic. But then that last line, or those last couple lines, they're gone to praise God and his priest and king, who make up a heaven of our misery, sort of suggesting that God creates misery for us, and like we should praise him for that. So it's not directly stated, but it definitely has a lot more like cynical approach to religion or to spirituality. So you can definitely see the kind of differences in these poems, the ones that are paired together, similar ideas, similar questions being asked, similar subject matter. They all involve religion in some capacity, but the ones that are from the Songs of Innocence, the Lamb and the First Chimney Sweeper, a lot more childlike perspective, a lot more sort of innocent approach to the big questions that are being asked. And then with the tiger, and then this second one, more ambiguity about God, more like harsh realism, which William Blake is kind of known for that. He wrote a lot of poems that kind of showed the plight of poor people, which had never really been done very much before. So that's kind of one of the things that he's remembered for, is drawing attention to how horrible some people had it. So that's interesting. So that's actually all we're going to do today. I just wanted to like go through these poems with you. And he's one of the biggest names in poetry at all, actually, but especially romantic poetry. People kind of tend to think of him as like the top person from early romantic poetry, and there are like three other dudes later who are looked on as like the late romantic poets. You will have an assignment about these poems tomorrow, but we're going to worry about that tomorrow. So before I let you guys go, does anybody have any like major questions about these poems? Any thoughts or reflections? Okay. Well, I'm going to let you guys go then, and I will see you tomorrow.